Welcome to Malcolm and We, heard exclusively on malcolmpresents.com, a streaming platform heard around the world and beyond. And on the top of the corner is Jana Larson, my co-host. I'm Malcolm Berman, and today our guest is Jennie Spanos, or Spanos. Take it away.
Thank you, Malcolm. Yes, today we have Jennie Spanos. Did I pronounce it correctly? Close
If
enough?
it was my papa, it would be Spanosa.
Spanos.
Spanosa. Okay. Jennie Spanosa, and her pronouns are she, her. And she's a co director of Move to Amend. She started working with Move to Amend almost 10 years ago as a volunteer with the Pensacola and Mendocino affiliates. As a journalist, she saw how much control big companies have over our government and communities. This experience made her really passionate about environmental, social, and economic justice issues. She now works with different grassroots movements to create a fair and sustainable future. Corporate power, along with unfair treatment and damage to the environment, leads to a lot of injustices. Move to Amend is a nonpartisan, broad coalition of organizations and individuals who share common values, working together to end corporate personhood and to demand real democracy with accountability, responsibility, and commitment to anti oppression in all areas of society and humanity. Jennie lives a fairly nomadic life and loves spending time with her family, creating things, hiking, and being in nature. And she was recently at the Democratic National Convention outside. So we're hoping for an up close and personal reflection of this amazing experience. Jennie, welcome to our show.
Welcome,
Thank you,
Jennie.
Yana. Welcome. Thank you, Malcolm, for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to share Move to Amend, which, I've been, as you mentioned, part of for over 10 years now. It was during the crucible of the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico that, my political awakening even further aligned in this way. I am with Move to Amend, and as you mentioned, we're nonpartisan. Our organizing is rooted in grassroots and anti-oppression organizing. We're trying to build a movement strong enough to pass what we call the We the People Amendment, which is currently in the House, is HJR 54. And it's pretty simple. Basically, it's two provisions. One says that a corporation is not a person, and only human beings should have the rights protected under the Constitution, and that money is not a form of free speech, and that it should be regulated in our elections.
Okay.
So those are the
Now,
two main.
for people who are unaware, what are you amending?
The U.S. Constitution. We would like to pass what technically the 29th Amendment, right? Because the ERA should have already been passed and ratified. So, out of respect for the work that the Equal Rights Amendment has already in the basis they've already laid, we say the 29th Amendment, but the next amendment is the 28th. We kind of formed out of shortly before the Citizens United decision came down. Once the Supreme Court pulled it back up, we kind of saw the writing on the wall. So, a couple of handfuls of folks gathered in a living room, organizers from across the country, and decided that we needed to be proactive, right? That again, the Supreme Court was going to rule on the side of corporations over people's rights. And they did. And they further codified this insane notion that a corporation is a person, and that its money, since it has no mouth, is a form of free speech that can be given without limits in our elections. And we've seen devastating effects since then. In 2010, the election cost around $6 million. We've already spent over $600 million in this election. So just to put that financial scale on
Gosh.
there. Yeah. And more it's corporations or entities that have connections to foreign countries that are deciding our elections. We know that in the 2020 election, in 2016 elections, we saw a lot of Russian interference. This year, we're seeing a lot of APAC. You know, they've spent $100 million in the election so far this year. And so, you know, when you have that kind of money coming in, it's kind of like a bullhorn to our little whispers as we the people.
Right. Now, as far as a contribution to campaigns or elections, uh, foreign countries or foreign corporations or non-citizens, they can contribute, right? As far as much as they want.
Absolutely. So, you know, a lot of people think that that's illegal, and it's not. And that's why there's some states that are passing laws to try to stop any foreign money from coming in. But let's take a random corporation, say ExxonMobil, for example. You know, the kind of money that they could
For
spend in
example.
election. Right. You know, this is a multinational corporation that can spend without limits in our election. And that's just one of many. So it's really drowning out the voices of individual human beings um, under these kind of circumstances.
Well, normally, if I'm correct, at the end of the commercial or the for the election, it said this is brought to you by, but most of them are names that you wouldn't know who the hell they are. Is there any law that has to identify the people who are supplying the funds, not with the pseudonyms?
Yeah, well, you know, now you can give to super PACs and things like that, and that's where it starts getting darker, right? Us as individuals, when we give to a campaign or to a candidate, then our names will be out there. But when you're giving to, say, a super PAC and things like that, that's when it gets a little murkier and where darker money comes in, the
So now,
influence of that darker
what do
money.
we have to do to get rid of Citizens United?
Well, the only way to overturn a Supreme Court decision is by amending the Constitution, right? That's the highest law of the land, and you know they've been making egregious decisions since the founding, right? We can take Dred Scott as an example, and then you know not until the 13th, 14th Amendments did we start to be able to change the tide of that horrendous decision, right? That a corporation or that a human being is property. And what the 14th Amendment said is it gave equal protection, right? Ironically, or out of design, that was the First Amendment that was hijacked by corporate entities. And in it was Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. And it started with just a head note in that case that said, although this was not decided, we all agree that a corporation is a person. So they used this amendment, which I find one of the most egregious, this amendment, the 14th Amendment, to, since the powers that be could no longer say that a human being was property, they used their property as human beings and got personhood, essentially personhood protections under our Bill of Rights, which are supposed to be inalienable rights, right? These legal fictitious entities now have human constitutional rights, essentially. So to overturn that, which you know, I hear that a lot. How do we overturn Citizens United? Again, that was built on precedents. You know, they also have the Fourth Amendment right. Since Citizens United, the Supreme Court has granted Hobby Lobby and other corporations, in the Hobby Lobby case, granted corporations religious freedoms, which of course trumps women's rights in that case. So they have a right to privacy where we can no longer, OSHA used to be able to inspect polluting corporations. Now we must get a warrant to inspect. So, by then they could clean up their act.
Yeah.
Right to privacy, right not to speak. I think we could use the fact that oil companies have been essentially cooking our planet, right, raising the temperatures of our planet. They've known since the 70s. And they had a right to remain silent under these insane legal doctrines and decisions
Well,
handed out by the Supreme Court.
getting back to Citizens United, you say that the way to get rid of that would be a constitutional amendment.
Yes.
Now, from what I understand, to do a constitutional amendment, you need the states, I think a certain majority of the states, to pass it locally and then give it over to the Congress, which is almost impossible to do. Is there another way of doing it or averting it or sidestepping it?
Well, so there is. You could go through the legislature, which is what we are working to do. We have a bill before the House. It was introduced by Pramila Jayapal. It's currently HJR 54 with 86 congressional supporters. But we have a multi-prong approach that we are taking. So we're grassroots oriented. Um, we have we're working at the state and local level. For example, I live in Escambia County, which is Pensacola, Florida, and the city of Pensacola has passed a resolution in support of the We the People Amendment. So has Escambia County. There's also several states that have passed amendments in support, and hundreds of counties and cities across the country. We also connect our work with so many other things. We have over 780 endorsing organizations, and if y'all would like to endorse, we would love to have y'all as an endorsing organization.
Yeah.
An example too that have taken it up a notch, Veterans for Peace. They have been a long time supporter of the We the People Amendment and Move to Amend, but now they're partners in that they have made it part of their strategic plan and their mission to pass the We the People Amendment, because as Mike Ferner, the prior president, he just stepped away, I think last month, said, we've been fighting fires for so long and it's time to get at the arsonists. And he recognizes that this would get at the arsonists by putting people in charge of our democracy instead of corporations.
Now, we the people, is that I know that applies to federal, but does that apply to local elections also?
So candidates, we do have what we call a pledge campaign where candidates can pledge to support resolutions and at their level or whatever level they're on. So that could be any candidate in any office, anybody that's running for office that will be elected by their peers. And but currently HJR 54 is making its way through the legislature. There's other ways you can amend the Constitution, such as a constitutional convention, right? And there are people that are organizing for that, and we're not opposed to that. Number one, it's never been done, and
In
since
1776.
since 1776, and also it leaves it could get a little dicey on language and being co-opted and hijacked.
Yeah, I just want to
So
know why we hold. I understand, but why do we hold everything that people made in 1776 as the ultimate, act of democracy? When 1776, they didn't know what's going to happen in the year 2024, 2025. Why are these people who actually, when they did the Constitution, I think a lot of them were in their early 20s. Why were they such wise people that they could predict what would happen, 250 years later? And that
absolutely.
we have to hold to this like it's the work of God. It's part of the Ten Commandments. Oh, it's the Constitution, and we can't do anything against the Constitution. It was written by men. 250 years ago.
White men.
White men.
White men, landowning men, right?
Right.
Yes.
So,
And and in order to vote, you had to have land. And of course, forget about women and people of color. Forget about that. In fact, women recently, what was it, 1926, where you got the right to vote?
yeah, absolutely. Corporations had rights protected under the
Yeah.
Constitution, 50 years before women had rights protected under the
But now
And now
move
we're
to
going backwards.
right. Now move to amend. How can
Supreme
they
Court.
volunteer? Do you have a website that people could go to?
Absolutely. If even if you don't want to volunteer, you just want to say, hey, I support this, you could go to movetoamend.org/motion. And that's and also you can sign up to volunteer at that point in time.
And we'll put information on our information
Yeah.
sheet. I'm proud to say I'm a monthly donator. I don't donate very much, but I do. Um, I don't
Thank
know
you,
what the
Donna.
time is, Malcolm. Oh, you're welcome. But I want to get this in because Malcolm only gives me like a moment before he says, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Well, but I want to talk about you went to Chicago and you
Yeah,
were
that's what I was going
outside.
to bring about. Right.
Okay, well, I beat you. So here we go.
Okay.
I want to, talk. I know you didn't go inside, but what was the scene outside? And what did you do?
So we participated in marches and rallies and panel discussions, conversations with organizations and people across the city. It was powerful. It was engaging. There was so much solidarity and um, one march, for example, we were in rally. We marched with the Poor People's Campaign and Human Rights
Oh,
Campaign.
I've
Poor People's
worked with
Army,
them.
excuse me, Poor People's Army and Human Rights Campaign.
Oh, that's
Um,
different.
and
Okay.
it is slightly different, but they have been
Right.
at 15 of the last 15 conventions, both RNC and DNC. They rallied in RNC. We joined them there. They marched from Milwaukee to Chicago. Uh, we joined up at a festival that was hosted by some local artists to celebrate the actions and the work that they were doing. We were able to connect with many legislators. We participated in the Progressive Conference 2024, which hosted many of our supporters, including our lead sponsor, Pramila Jayapal, Bernie Sanders. We met with Jill Stein again, and
Again,
she's been a longtime
what
supporter.
group was this that you participated with?
Poor People's Army.
Poor People's Home. And what were they wanted to happen? What was what were they protesting? What were they advocating?
Well, they're advocating for well, mainly they're trying to get some equality work.
Some
They have
social
been marching
justice, maybe.
for social justice, human rights.
Equity.
The
Yeah.
Supreme Court equity, right? The Supreme Court, they're 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 fighting for economic human rights.
Hmm.
Of course, the Supreme Court recently, in the last 2 days of this last session, the Grants Pass. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that decision,
Which
but
one?
basically, Grants Pass decision, and basically they criminalized homelessness. Prior to that, it was illegal to punish somebody for being poor, in theory,
That was
but
the debtor's prison in the old days.
right, and that had been overturned. But in this recent Supreme Court decision, they basically criminalized homelessness or houselessness, which is horrible. Horrible
Such a
decision.
ridiculous, vicious cycle. It just
Yana, it's heartbreaking. These folks are already,
down and out, and then to be criminals because they've been lost their jobs, the rent's gotten so high they can't live there anymore, gentrification, and all those
Well,
other things that happen.
and more
It's
and
homelessness
more of
is
that.
It's not a unified problem. It's not a problem, that there's one fix on it, that people who are poor. There are a
or
lot
one
of,
reason.
yeah, there are a lot of reasons. As a matter of fact, I used to work with, I'm forgetting the name of it, this homeless shelter in Los Angeles, basically, and uh, I wish I could remember the name of the woman that was ahead of it. And she had started it. Actually, her husband had started it. And when he was passing away, he gave the leadership to his wife, and he said, "It's perfect timing." He said, "When I started this, mainly the homeless were the ones that were on drugs or on alcohol or soldiers." He said, "But now a lot of the homeless are families, women with kids."
Hmm.
Well,
Domestic
the
They're
housing
violence.
doing
market
it.
the housing market's being dominated by corporate interests. Again, houses should be for people, right? We have 10 times more empty houses than we have houseless people. So,
Yes.
um, and the Poor People's Army, they've done some really fascinating stuff, occupying empty dwellings and things like that. But of course, ultimately they were trying to challenge the corporate status quo. We also marched with the coalition of over 200 folks, the March on the DNC. And, they had several demands. One was to end aid to Israel for weapons, not all aids, to demand a ceasefire, money for jobs, school, healthcare, housing, things that are the environment, instead of, we never have money for these things, but we always have money for
Well,
war, it seems.
well, to me,
You
the,
know,
the, the number one problem of this world is facing, not any individual country, is the climate change.
absolutely. It
From
is
what I see, and,
it's
and, and I don't see why it's not a major issue, because
Because there's so much denial
no,
and
you
the
look around the world. It's
responsibility
not only our
for the
country.
problem.
It's not only our country, but you look around the world and total climates are changing, whether
And
it
it's
be
because
with
of
the
one of the
hurricanes,
leading causes is our
the
country and
hurricanes, the
underdeveloped
tornadoes,
countries.
the oceans getting warmer, the fish are dying in huge numbers. Whales are beaching themselves. Sharks are coming more inland. The
Right.
whales are
whole world is
attacking
changing,
yachts.
and yeah, and sort of like 90% of the scientists say it's because of the fossil fuels.
Hmm.
It's but yet,
Meanwhile,
meanwhile, when we have a candidate says, "Well, now when I'm elected, it's dig, baby, dig," because he wants to get
Yeah,
more oil, more coal.
give me some money and I'll make sure to wipe away all the
Right.
well,
legislation that's
But what I
inhibiting you
want, but
from
what I
and
having
want
one
to
carte
say,
candidate
blanche.
says so he can just take care of it just like that with
right,
one little
the
conversation.
day I get elected. But the thing I want to bring up on you, which I haven't had an answer for, is you were talking about the U.S. not funding Israel as far as to the war, demanding a ceasefire. What I want to know, what is a ceasefire at that region? As far as I understand, which maybe I'm doing things simplistic, if there's a ceasefire and Israel does not try to get rid of Hamas, what Hamas will do would be rebuild. As far as I understand, that underneath, that underneath the schools and the hospitals and the various buildings are mazes of tunnels that they could drive trucks through. And part of the uh, problems of having a ceasefire. What happens when there is a ceasefire? One of the demands is that the Israelis cannot go on the border of Egypt and the Palestine area. But that is the area that Hamas is bringing arms in and has been. So what do you do about that? You cease fire. For my thing, if there's a ceasefire and there's no agreement, the Hamas are going to build up to attack again, and there's nothing stopping them.
It's a horrible
Yeah, I
situation.
agree that a lot of innocent people are being killed, but Is it Israelis' fault?
Over 40,000
Yeah. Well, is it Israelis' fault,
this year.
or is the Hamas's hiding underneath the buildings and building up their arms? That's why they have the tunnels in the first place.
I'm going to be honest. I am not a Middle East expert,
Oh,
right?
okay.
I just know that one side has an army, the other one doesn't. And I know we're arming one side. And also what I understand is expansion, expansion, expansion that continues against international law, has continued and continued. And I also recognize that international body have condemned the tactics that are going on, the same ones that were, and you know, I don't want to get in too much into the trenches
Okay.
of those politics. What I do know is that the US has a role in calling for a ceasefire. They can play a bigger role in doing that, in bringing people to the table. I think that my personal opinion, and that this, you know, I'm not speaking for move to amend, but a two-party solution is the only solution I see, um, personally. But move to amend has, you know, does agree that the US should not be arming this war. Um, and so there's the two different perspectives.
Okay.
But I do believe that we should play a bigger role in calling for a ceasefire and not always arming. And you know, I also coming from I come from a military family. Both my mother and my father are war veterans. Um, you know, my mother is still very sick from her time during the first Gulf War. So, you know, at a very, very young age, I recognized the power of the military industrial complex and the profits made through war.
Oh, definitely.
And
Well, yeah, I mean,
So,
a lot of, yeah, there are
with
a
all
lot
your
of
work
people
that you're
making
doing
profits. Well,
with
as they
Move
say,
to
war is hell.
it is.
with with all the work you're doing with Move to Amend and your just work over the years with being sensitive to all the injustices in the environment and society and with people and you know everything, you know, you've had a long time to think about it, ponder about it, worry about it, get sad about it, get mad about it, and work towards improving things. Do you see some good things happening?
I do see some good things happening. And just like Malcolm said, really all of our attention should be on what we can do to reverse what's happening in our environment, right? Because we can't live without clean water, clean air, you know. But what was it 2 years ago that they put water as a commodity that's being exchanged on the stock exchange, you know? I
Yeah,
mean, this kind of thing, these basic human rights that a corporation doesn't really need to live, right, to
right.
survive with. So you know, that is it is so important that that's where we're funneling our attention, that's where we're funneling our money, not into the war machine, not into distractions, you know. um and to me, though, that's some of the most important work. That's the reason that we created the ecology network, to come together and have those conversations and to work together for solutions. There are some, you know, but as long as corporations have corporate constitutional rights and their money are a form of speech that they can give without limits in our elections, how clearly can the people be heard?
Yeah,
Um,
I totally agree with you. Now, once again, could you tell us how to contact you or to support your move to amend?
Absolutely. Move to amend.org. Um, we keep it super simple. You can sign the motion at movetoamend.org/motion. You can help support us. We do not get any corporate funding, any, you know, there's no billionaires supporting us. We get no government funding. It's all grassroots funded. Like Yana said, you know, I mean, I donate to Move to Amend as well. And that's how we that's how we support the work we're doing, is from small grassroots donations. And you can donate at movetoamend.org/donate.
Yeah, I think that's one of the major things that we can do to change how elections are run.
Yes, and it's working with groups like mine that I work with, We the World, and yours, and all the others out there. We're coming together, coming together, working together, not to lose our individual identities, but
Uh,
just to come
yeah.
together as a force,
Well,
you
guys, I'd
know,
hate to tell you this, Anna.
Absolutely.
Yana, you know what's happening now.
giving them the eye now.
Our time, our time is up, but we will speak to Ayana on how they, people from our audience can contribute, and she'll put it down where we have a separate page that just is involved with, not cell numbers, but email addresses and how people can get in contact with you or your cause.
Absolutely. And you can reach me personally at Jennie@movetoamend.org, and that's JENNIE at movetoamend.org.
I
And I'll
thank
be in
you.
touch with you. Okay. So
I love that,
follow up.
Yana.
Okay.
I thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
by the way, tell your friends that you should be up by the weekend on our website, and it's at malcolmpresents.com. Then you go to Malcolm and We,
And I'll
and
follow up with that information too.
and
Fantastic. Yeah, I've been
and
going through your
they'll
website. I
see
love
your
it.
show. Anyway,
Thank
and
you
then
so
thank
much
you,
for all you're doing.
and thank you very much for your time and what you've been doing. Yana, I will see you next week.
Okay.
And I
Bye
think
bye.
we're having the head of
Yes. Next week we have Rick Ulfik, founder of We the World and the co-creator of the 11 Days of Global Unity. And so yeah, we're having 11 Days of Global Unity for our 20th anniversary. We'll have Ken Mayers there from Veterans for Peace too on our Day of Disarmament.
bye guys,
Fantastic.
and thanks again,
Thank you.
Jenny. Bye.